Hello, guys. Let's talk about why it's important to have a financial foundation. Welcome back to day 3 of your session here. This is Keyon Corniffe, also known as Mr. Finance, your favorite financial educator and business coach. So today I'm here to talk about the importance of having a stronger financial foundation and how do you put one together? What are the importance of it? Now, the importance of having a strong financial foundation is that you got to learn how to create a financial goal with an action plan to build and preserve your wealth, right? And that's what's so important about it. Now, we got to understand the fundamentals and we're going to break this down so that way you get a better understanding. So let's talk about the first thing, proper protection. What do we mean by having proper protection? Now, this is the first thing you got to put in place before you start doing anything, right? You don't invest first. You don't start paying off your debt. You don't, no. You got to put together proper protection first. That is the first important thing you have to do. And the reason why I do this is because you got to plan for 3 events that's going to happen in your life, and you can't predict either one of them. You can't predict when you're going to die, and you can't predict when you're going to have a health issue, and you can't predict when you're going to have disabilities. So what are the 4 things you must have in place before you pass away? And I'm going to tell you why you need to have this done. Now, before you pass away, you got to have 4 things. You got to have your life insurance in place. You then have to have a final expense insurance. Then you need to have a will. Then you need to have a trust. Now, let's go in a little deeper. Why life insurance? When you think about it, owning life insurance, a lot of people consider life insurance to death insurance. And there's a difference between the two. Life insurance is for the living. And when you prepare your life insurance, the way you know how much life insurance you will need is because you know what's called your DIME method. DIME, your DIME method. Knowing your DIME method helps you to know how much insurance you need. So what you're going to do is calculate is the D stands for debt. How much debt do you have? You're going to write that down. The I stands for your income. What is your annual net income? Now times that by 10. So for example, I'll give you an example in the end. Now the M stands for your mortgage. What is the balance of your mortgage? How much is the balance of your mortgage? And then the E stands for educational planning for your children and how many kids, or if you're a grandparent, how many of your grandkids you would like to leave some money for if God forbid something happens to you. So let's say that you have a debt of $50,000. This could be your car note, your credit cards, student loans, all of this. Let's say that you make an income of say 50,000 a year, right? 50,000 a year, that's what you take home net, times that by 10. That means you need a replacement of your income of $500,000. Then you have a balance of your mortgage. Let's say that's 200,000. And you have 2 children and each of them want to go to school. So each tuition is going to run you around $60K per child, which puts you at $120,000 in total planning for 2 kids. So when you look at this and you add it up, and you say, well, how much do I need as far as income replacement, as far as insurance coverage? So if you have the debt of 50,000 and then you add the 500,000 for income replacement plus the 200,000 for mortgage protection, right, to pay off the mortgage, and then educational planning for each child. So right there and then you realize that you need $870,000 in insurance coverage. So now what insurance will be the best insurance for you? Well, that's determined based upon your what's affordable and suitable for you. Meaning, let's say that you don't have a lot of money. Let's say that you're someone that can't afford to put away a lot of money. Maybe a term insurance might be the best what's for you for right now. Now, let's say that you're someone that you just want a little bit more permanent policy, right? Maybe then cash value life insurance is what's best for you at this moment, right? So you just got to know where you are financially. That's why it's so important to know what's your budget, right? And then once you put together your life insurance, then the next thing you need to have is something called your final expense insurance. This is what takes care of your funeral arrangements. So your final expense insurance is what's so important to have also on top of your life insurance, because life insurance does not pay out immediately when you pass away, but your final expense insurance does within 48 hours of you passing. So that way your family could take care of your final expenses, like for your funeral. Then the next thing you need to have is a will. Now, why do you need a will? A will is to make sure that everything is in writing. Who gets what, who don't get what, and who gonna take care of your children, who takes possession of your assets, like your home, your car, your bank, all these things. Then also you need to have what's called a power of attorney, right? POA, your power of attorney. Who's gonna make decisions for you when you can't make them for yourself? And you also need to have what's called a health directive. A health directive. Now, the health directive is where you're going to put on paper what you want them to do to you if you become unresponsive. Then you create a trust. Number 4, you need to have a trust. Why do you need to have a trust? It's so that you can put all your assets inside of this trust to protect it from what's called probate court, right? You want to avoid probate court. And probate court could be a process where it could take up to about 40% of your family's estate due to the probate court because you didn't have a will and these things in place. The trust protect all of your assets and avoid you from going through probate. And what will happen is that you could transfer wealth to your family without losing your estate. These are things that's so important that you must have in place before you pass away. Now, when it comes to your health issues, you got to make sure you know what kind of health insurance you have. Do you have an HMO or do you have a PPO? The difference between the HMO and the PPO is that HMOs are very cheap. Now, you have to stay within the network of that company, and you got to also know what's your deductions. Now, for PPO can be quite expensive, but it gives you a lot more flexibility and a lot more freedom to go outside of network and get access to specialists and so on. But it's more important to always know what's your deductible. You got to know what's your deductible and make sure that you understand that very clearly, because your deductible determines how much you would have to pay first before the health insurance companies start to pay. You always want to know what's your deductible and what's your copay, and before you just go to any place and start seeing a doctor or a specialist. Also, another thing, when it comes to disability, you got to also know about long-term care, LTC. Now, do you currently have long-term care? Because the reason why long-term care is important for disability is that if you can't perform 2 daily acts of living out of these living conditions, like for instance, if you can't bathe yourself and clothe yourself, transport yourself, or feed yourself, toileting, all these different things, if you can't do any of the above, if you can't do out of the 2 out of that 5 that I just mentioned, guess what? You may need what's called long-term care, which is an assistant, or some people call them a CNA, right? CNA. And that's a certified nursing assistant that will come to your house and help you with these challenges. Now, the thing is, long-term care helps to pay for that, so that way you don't have to come out of pocket. That's why it's important to have proper protection in place for those unexpected moments. Guys, it's good to have proper protection. That's the reason why you got to put together your proper protection first before you do anything else. Now, in order to start managing your debt, you got to put yourself in a position where you start learning about the debt roller program. Now, the debt roller program is very simple. What you got to do is put yourself in a position where you learn how to calculate all your debt. When you start making a list of your debt, here's a few things that you got to know. Number 1, you got to know who you owe, right? Who's the creditors that you owe? Number 2, you got to know what is the balance. What is the balance of that debt? And number 3, you got to know what's the APR of the debt, what's the interest on that debt. And number 4, you got to know what is the minimum monthly payment that is required. What is the monthly required premium? Now, once you do this, the first debt you're going to pay off is called the small debt. You're going to look for the smallest debt and you're going to pay that debt off. Now, one of the things that's important is that once you put together your budgeting, you will know how much of that 2.5% you can now apply towards that debt. So if the minimum payment for your first debt was, say, $50, and you find out that you have an extra $100 to apply to that, you're going to take that $150 and apply it to the smallest debt first. And once you pay off that smallest debt, you then apply the $150 to the second debt that you have. Let's say that second debt was $100 and you have $150 from the first debt. Now you're going to apply that $150 to the second debt. Now you're applying $250 towards your second debt. It's called the debt roll-up concept. Now, the next thing you got to learn is about emergency fund. Now, why it's important to put aside 3 to 6 months of emergency fund? Now, if you're putting away that 5% every month towards your emergency fund, the goal is to get to a point where you have 3 to 6 months of your income saved up in your emergency fund by doing so on a month-to-month basis. The goal is to get to 3 to 6 months, because if you have any unexpected, let's say, accidents or repairs that are needed, at least you have the funds there, so that way you can stop using your credit cards. Your credit cards have a high interest rate that you're borrowing and using people's money at, versus you can have the emergency fund sit to the side to do that. And then when it comes to saving and investing, you got to put yourself in a position where you understand what is your tax tolerance and your risk tolerance. What do I mean? Now, before you start to invest your money and saving your money, you got to know, well, how's my money going to be taxed when I need it? There's 3 ways your money get taxed when you need it. Your money get taxed now, it get taxed later, and it also get taxed never. Now, you got to think about this. Which sounds better to you? Probably the tax never, right? Great. So if the tax never is the great way that you want to go, especially towards your retirement, then you have to learn about tax advantage and why tax advantage is so important. Learn about tax advantage versus the now where it's taxable and the later where it's tax deferred. The fact that tax advantage, you do not pay taxes on the gains and you do not pay taxes on the withdrawals. Unlike your tax later bracket, which is tax deferred, you will be paying taxes upon the withdrawals and your tax as ordinary income. Then if you're taxed in the now bracket where money is taxable, you'll be taxed on the gains upon distributions. So these are the big difference about learning about tax advantages. And then when it comes to your risk tolerance, you got to know the difference between being an aggressive investor. You got to know what is a moderate. You got to know what is a moderate growth. And you got to know what is a conservative. Now, being conservative means that you're not willing to put a large amount of your money at risk, because money comes at risk if you're investing in the stock market. Conservative means that you're a very low risk taker. You would probably put at least, around, say, 30% of your money inside of the market if you want to take risk. Now, being a moderate investor, you mean that you want to do 50-50. You're willing to do 50% in the market, 50% in the fixed. If you're a moderate growth, it means that you're someone that's want to put 65% in the market and you want to hold on to the 25% in a fixed account. Then you also have, the 35. You hold on to 35. Then as an aggressive, it means that you're 100% in the market. You're 100% in the market. Whatever comes with that, you're 100% in the market, being an aggressive investor. So once again, you got to know what is your risk tolerance and your tax tolerance as you put money away towards your investment. A rule of thumb says that, most people can afford risk when they're younger and they're willing to take a lot of risk to make a lot of gains because they have a lot of years to save. But as you tend to get older, you want to limit down your risk and you want to learn how to limit down how much tax you will be paying as you get older, because as you get older, you have little dependents that you could write off or things that you could claim as credit in your tax preparing time. And you want to make sure that you lower your taxable income as you get older, because as you get older, you probably won't have much tax credit opportunities, because your house will probably be paid off, your kids are grown, and a lot of things won't be there to write it off. Unless you have a part-time business, then you have a 1099 or you have a Schedule C or something like that that you can leverage off to lower your taxable income. All right, guys. So I hope that helps you to understand a little bit more about how to put together proper protection. What you want to do now is definitely sit down and go over this, so that way we can strategize and put together your financial foundation and make sure that everything is all good for you. All right. So my name is Keyon Corniffe, also known as Mr. Finance, your favorite financial educator and business coach. Remember that you're one decision away from changing your future for the better. So always remember that the choice is always yours. Let's continue building and let's continue working. I'll see you guys at day 4. All right. Keep up the good work. See you at the top.